Hey there, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We're changing gears here, but this is really a rather extraordinary conversation we're going to have. And it actually is about this is, as you know, a Danny Halbin painting of the Harlem River. And of course, you can see Bronx Community College up in the background up there. But this is all about the Harlem River. And wait till you hear how crazy this is. But we'll start with Assemblyman Landon Dais. Nice to see you, sir. He's with the 77th Assembly District and my longtime friend and colleague. It is the coordinator of the Harlem River Working Group, Chauncey Young. Nice to see you, Chauncey. Assembly members, so here is this proposal. Now I'm going to read a state proposal would exempt the Harlem River from meeting certain clean water standards, effectively locking in poor water quality for decades to come. I just don't this is just doesn't make any sense to me. Of all the waterways in New York State, of all the waterways in New York City, the one that's right over there is the one that seems to need the most help. But explain where this is coming from and what this is about.
I think in the technical stuff, I think Chauncey can elaborate a little bit more. I've learned in this business, I speak as well and eloquently where I have a specialization, and then I lean on those who are experts that deal with certain issues, right? However, what I can talk from as a common sense standpoint is that we have come a long way in fixing the rivers around and the waterways around New York City. From the most probably polluted, the Gowanus waterway, which we still got a long work to do, the Harlem and East River, and the Hudson River. What I know is right now, what I want is more projects that's going to help clean and filter the East River so that it can be used for recreation, so that our aquatic life can thrive. I want the $1 billion oyster project to be proliferated all up and down the East and Harlem River to help clean our waterways. I do not want more sewage. I do not want more chemicals. I want clean water so that our residents can have a better environment around them, so our animals can have a better environment around them. I live right on the Harlem River. I overlook it. I live in High Bridge. My backyard looks right down into it. I don't want to smell sewage. What I do want to see are hawks. I do want to see fish. I want to see animals enjoying themselves. I want to see boats, rowboats, and recreational rowboats on the river, and that will be hurt if we can let this dumping into our river happen. If anyone knows me in the 77 in the West Bronx, I am the anti-dumping person, from garbage on our streets to pollution in our waters. And I would love to turn it over to Chauncey, who could talk a little bit more and the great work that he's doing in this issue also.
I will. We will certainly do that. I want to just mention, because you mentioned the oyster situation. I was right there in on City Island when they began the oyster project, and
Yep.
so I fully understand the value of that. I had never heard that could or should be expanded around and even put into the Harlem River. So let's see. The
Let
proposed
me. I'm
no,
sorry, guy,
that's
but I do want to just reiterate on that. What people don't realize with the oysters are a magnificent filters, right? And so what they do is they take oyster larvae and they put it in these artificial concrete reefs, and they put them in blocks along the waterways, right? But it has three major impacts, right? One, water filtration. Two, it creates a healthier ecosystem. And three, it's also shown to create resiliency projects. So when we have rising water, when we have flooding occurring on the Northeast corridor with Superstorm Sandy and other superstorms, these oyster projects can also help stop water coming into our to New York City and our seaboard of New York. And so it really has a trifecta. It has an economic impact, it has an environmental impact, and it has a health impact. And anytime you have something that makes that much sense, I truly believe in working and making a part of our holistic approach and making it cleaner and safer New York.
So we will certainly turn to Chauncey to get some details here. But the proposed exemption would allow, and this is really the germ of the problem, would allow an estimated 1.9 billion gallons of sewage and polluted stormwater to continue entering the Harlem River each year. Chauncey, this is the problem, is that number one, there is sewage that's being dumped into the Harlem River, which you can barely imagine. And number two, it's polluted stormwater. So, for example, when I forget which hurricane it was, but the Major Deegan was flooded, all that water ends up into the Harlem River, and it's a double indemnity. My last comment, and then it's your floor, Chauncey. We cleaned up the Bronx River. And if
Exactly.
people say it can't be done, well, let's start with the river for which this borough is named, and let's use that as one example of something we can do. Chauncey, what is the problem, and what are the solutions?
Sure. So, Gary, thanks so much for having us here today. It's a really important conversation. The Harlem River right now receives more CSOs, which are, combined sewage overflows, which you mentioned, where untreated sewage, stormwater, trash, and other pollutants get, discharged into our local waterways during heavy rain events, because you're reaching the capacity of the local wastewater treatment plants. So the Harlem River has more CSOs than any river in the state of New York.
Wow.
It receives over 1.9 billion gallons of CSOs annually from 65 outfalls, averaging 5 million gallons per day. We made tremendous steps forward with the Tibbetts daylighting project, where we're going to be diverting part of the overflow from the Broadway CSO, which is the largest CSO going into the Harlem River, but it doesn't impact the fact that we need to have a plan for addressing the CSO to really be improving the quality of the waterfront. So that is the real issue that we have here. What the city and the state, the DEP and the DEC are proposing is they're stating that they've created an impossible situation where we have leaving it as it is, which is what the city is proposing, and changing the designation to say you can swim, you can boat, you can fish in the Harlem River, just not for 36 to 48 hours after any rain event. Or they said if we spend over $9 billion, they can put a sewer tube down the Harlem River to collect all the CSOs and bring them to a water treatment program. So they're saying either we spend $9 billion and we'll clean up the CSOs, or we just accept the fact that the Harlem River will not be clean, and residents in the Bronx and Upper Manhattan will just have to deal with a river that is receiving sewage, raw sewage, whenever there is a rain event. So there's another solution to that, and that solution would be doing green infrastructure, doing green roofs, planning some gray infrastructure programming to collect rainwater, to collect runoff. It means real investment into the Bronx and Upper Manhattan, so within the watershed of the Harlem River waterfront. Instead, what they've done with a lot of the long-term control plans in the East River, in the Hudson River, is we're actually diverting some of that sewage and overflow into the Harlem River. So it's, that's not equitable for our communities. And as you know, we've been advocating for folks to be able to kayak, canoe, be able to enjoy their waterfront, get access to the waterfront, just like so many communities throughout New York City have. And that only can be done if we commit to cleaning up the river.
So, if you go to Assemblyman Dais and say, well, you're negotiating a budget and we want $9 billion, that's not realistic. That's not going to happen.
It's not realistic, yes.
Assemblyman, are these workarounds realistic? In other words, you say, let's do it step by step and move things in a direction. Is that a viable way? Do you think that's the kind of thing the legislature would say, hey, this is a good idea?
Well, anything that's fiscal is usually from the executive branch and will come down on the governor and mayor in collaboration in that end. From the legislative budget process, we obviously have a finite number that we have. We have a very tough situation with the current federal government where we're going to be looking at major cuts. And that concerns me because anyone knows something about me. I have a construction background. In my office, you'll see my hard hat on my desk. And I'm a big believer in building infrastructure, green infrastructure, and waterways and water treatment and water projects. I think is worth it, right? Not just from our sewage, but even making sure all of our lead pipes are replaced across New York City, where we have put funding in. So I think it's gonna, when you have a price tag of $9 billion, it's gonna have to be over a large duration of time, and it's gonna have to be bonded in a way to pay for it. Without having a major impact on our taxpayers in New York State. And that's the difficult thing. We have a lot. I think one thing we forget about in New York City, we have an old city. Our infrastructure, our housing stock, our power grid, our water system. I live right next to the High Bridge, one of the oldest water projects in the country. And with old infrastructure means high price tag. But to John's point, though, we need to eventually, we're gonna have to pay for it one way or the other.
Listen, I don't want to run out of time, but
Sorry.
so to me, let's do sensible things that we can do,
Exactly.
big budgets, etc., rather than just say,
Exactly.
well, let's ignore the Harlem River. Chauncey, you brought up the daylighting of Tibbetts Brook. Is that a good example of the kinds of attitudes we should have toward cleaning up the Harlem River?
100%, 100%. I mean, assembly member is right thinking about it as a fiscal issue, but the steps that we can make really are on a much smaller scale than creating this insane $9 billion sewer tunnel. We really should be thinking about much smaller steps that we can do. Green infrastructure, green roofs, looking at gray infrastructure that can collect, looking at the way that we're designing our parks, our streets, our greenways, and other construction projects to look at collecting rainwater, to be able to minimize that flooding that, fills up our sewer system and creates that overflow situation. So it's a real opportunity for us to, push our agencies, our city, state, and federal, thinking about how we can address this issues. So it isn't that impossible situation of leaving a polluted river or, making an unaffordable sewer program.
I'm going to make a guess that you have an advocate in Albany in Assemblyman Dais, because,
100%.
and maybe this dialogue will open up a dialogue that says, okay, we're not going to, you don't want to do that, but let's do this. To me, that would be a sensible way for the state legislature. And of course, you talk about the executive, for the governor to react. We got to run. Assembly Member Landon Dais, thank you for your passion for our borough. Thank you for helping us all keep this waterway going. And Chauncey, you're not going to stop, right? This isn't the
hearings next week, virtual on Monday and in person on Wednesday at the DEC regional office.
Great. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the passion for the borough of the Bronx and also for the environment. Let's clean it up. Let's make it more useful for everybody. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you so much. Member Dais.
That will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We thank our friends at the National Dance Institute and the great stuff that they're doing. And now you get some idea about what we can do to clean up this river. And let's hope the state does it. And that's it. We'll see you next week. Good night.